Hi, it's Matt here from Go Green Autos. So in this video I'm going to look at these electric vans and look at the efficiency, i.e. the driving economy, and compare what they're like empty and with it loaded. So this van is the Toyota Proace, but exactly the same van is also the Vauxhall and Opel Vivaro, the Peugeot Expert and the Citron Dispatch. So this van, being the Toyota, is the medium wheelbase because Toyota only do the one body size, but all the versions of these vans are available with either a 50 kilowatt hour pack or a 75 kilowatt hour pack. In this case this is the smaller battery one, the 50, but I'm going to be looking at the driving efficiency, and that won't vary between either of the models, so we'll then can work that out or what range you would expect on both battery sizes. If you like these sort of videos, please do click that thumbs up button. That really does help, particularly if you do it early in the video. All helps with that YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel, and of course hit that little bell button if you want to be notified when I upload a new video. So let's start the van up, and this one's actually due a service. It's getting done tomorrow. So let's just look at the mileage. 5,538 miles, and if I use the buttons there on the end of the stalk, we will scroll round to the trip meter, and I'm going to reset trip number 1 there. So as I start this, we've got an estimated range of 129 miles, but as I've said, it's sort of irrelevant because that's based on recent driving economy. So I'm going to drive for probably about an hour or so. That's probably enough to find what its driving economy is today. Temperature outside is 19 degrees, and let's see what this does. So on this drive I'm trying to do a mixture of driving. So in this case on a dual carriageway, currently doing 60 miles an hour, and I'm trying to do the road speed all the time. So I'm trying to drive as normal as you can. I'm not trying to eco out the maximum economy from the van. I'm just driving normally. That said, I am using the B mode when I want to slow down and driving as you should drive an electric vehicle, but keeping up with the road speed. So I'm going to do a bit of mileage on dual carriageway at 60, 65, whatever the road speed allows, 70 if it allows it, and then the rest of the driving will be on more rural B roads because that's my sort of local environment. So on most of those you're typically driving along at sort of 50 miles an hour. I will try to go in a few villages to simulate city driving where the road speed is going to be, the average speed is going to be much more like, say, 20 miles an hour. I'm also trying to find some roads which have got some hills in them. Again, trying to simulate all types of road driving, and then I'm going to do exactly the same route when I've got a load in the back. So most of the time I am driving in eco mode, just because I would drive in eco mode normally. the eco mode on these vans isn't limiting the speed much, and nor your power. Eco mode on these is about the same as driving in a diesel. So and I'm using B mode now, slowing down to get to a roundabout. I have got to touch the brakes there because I was concentrating on talking and not on driving. But if you don't know, B mode is a button down here near the gear selector where it increases your regenerative braking. So if you're coming up to, in that case, a roundabout and you want to slow down, you lift your foot off the accelerator, and then that applies regen braking, which has nothing to do with the brakes. It's just slowing down on the electric motor. So effectively the electric motor, when you're not applying the accelerator, then turns into a dynamo and is producing electricity and putting it back in the battery, and that's what slows you down. And if it's not slowing you down enough, you push the B button for more regen braking, and that slows you down a bit quicker, so you don't have to apply the brakes. And what you're doing then is harnessing that kinetic energy going forward into the battery pack. So rather than touching the brakes, where you waste that energy in friction and heat and brake dust, you're putting that kinetic energy back in the battery, and that's what prolongs your range. So you want to use the tools that the electric vehicle gives you. However, there's a word of warning on these vans, is when it's slowing down on the regen, it doesn't put the brake lights on. And I've had conversations with people on Facebook about this in the past, saying yes, of course it does, all electric vehicles put the brake lights on when they need to, when you're slowing down, and it's obviously you're not seeing it because you're not slowing down enough. It hasn't got to that critical level where the vehicle thinks it puts the brake lights on. And all electric vehicles have always done that, right back since 2010. However, this is the first one of these vans I've got in, and the chap was right. These do not put the brake lights on, which I think is actually dangerous, because the Regen B mode on this is actually pretty good, and it does slow you down very well. And if you drive gently, you do not need to touch the brakes. The problem is people behind you don't know you're slowing down because the brake lights don't come on. So you've got to be a bit careful with these vans, that if you are slowing down, you do need to touch the brake pedal if there's someone behind you. And obviously if you're going to brake hard anyway, or in an emergency situation, you'll be slamming on the brakes anyway. So most of the time it's going to be fine. You just got to be a bit wary. If there's people behind you, you do need to touch the brakes if you are slowing down quite fast. But if there's no one behind you, try to use the B mode, try to do all your slowing down without touching the brakes if it's safe to do so, and you'll get maximum range. So I'm coming into a 30 here, so I've put it on B, and we weren't slowing down enough there, so I didn't touch the brakes because the people behind are further enough back. So that's the most economical way to drive. Basically exactly the same as petrol and diesel cars. If you can drive like you got no brakes, you're going to get much better fuel economy. So what else affects driving economy? Well, primarily it's how you drive the vehicle. So just the same as if you were driving a petrol or diesel vehicle, if you're hard on the accelerator and hard on the brakes, you're going to use more fuel. EVs are no different at all. So what you want to do is accelerate gently and brake gently, or even better, don't use the brakes at all. Allow the electric motor, the regen braking effect, to slow you down. So just use engine braking, and all that means is you read the road ahead a bit more, and when you're coming up to a roundabout, which I'm just coming up to now, you lift off the accelerator sooner and coast, and you'll see the needle here drop down into the charge section, so you're recouping that energy, putting power back into the battery. And I'm just going to push the B mode now here to get more regen, and we're coming to a complete standstill here almost. Virtually it takes you to a stop, and then I just touch the brakes gently there just to slow me down that last little bit, and also just to put the brake lights on to show other people behind that I'd stopped. So it's all about just driving smoothly, driving gently, and allowing the motor to slow you down rather than the brakes, and then you'll see good economy. It's a bit of a myth that lights and wipers and your stereo, your radio will reduce your range. It does use electricity, of course, and that electricity's got to come from somewhere. It's all coming from your traction battery, but the amounts all of this uses is so tiny, it's just not even measurable. So all of the car systems are powered by the 12-volt battery up front, but of course that is charged from the traction battery. So EVs don't have an alternator like a conventional car that's powered from the engine, which is charging your battery. Instead, they have a DC to DC converter, so when the vehicle is switched on and driving, but it just has to be switched on, the 400 volt battery is charging your 12 volt battery. So that's how the power is generated for all of this. But as I said, you can use your wipers, lights, stereo as much as you can. You're not going to see any loss of range at all, because the amount of kilowatts it's consuming is just absolutely minimal. What does affect it is obviously driving style, but the two things that uses huge amounts of power from the traction battery is obviously your electric motor, in this case driving the front wheels, and the heating and air conditioning system. That is directly powered from the 400 volt battery and does use a lot of energy. So with a combustion vehicle, obviously heat is a byproduct of burning fuel. So combustion vehicles have big radiators and they're trying to get rid of all this excess heat. So heating is effectively free, but of course you burn an awful lot of fuel and it's very inefficient to get that heat. But you've got endless amounts of heat with a combustion engine vehicle. It's obviously different with electric vehicles because there's no fire under your bonnet, so you have to make that heat, and heating does use an awful lot of energy. So this has a resistive heater, so think of it as a fan heater, and you're typically going to see something like 15% loss of range in the winter, something like that. Obviously it depends how much heating you use and how long you have it on for and how hot you have it on for. Also, batteries are cold in the winter, and a cold battery is less efficient than a warm battery, so in total factor in something like a 20% loss of range in the winter. But obviously we have cold days and warmer days, so it's very difficult to put exact figures on it. And then in the summer, when you're using the air conditioning, that does use a lot less power than the heating system. So air conditioning is more like 5 to 8%, something like that. Again, very difficult to put an exact figure on. But yeah, air conditioning, you won't really see a loss in range too much. Probably most of the time more like 5%, whereas heating you're looking more like 15%. But obviously it does depend on what it really is outside. And then the final factor is rain. And rain affects the fuel efficiency of a vehicle exactly the same as the combustion engine vehicle, but we don't really notice it with the combustion engine vehicles. You notice it more on EVs, particularly EVs with smaller battery packs and shorter ranges, because you're concentrating on that more. And purely that's down to the rolling resistance of the tyre. When there's standing water on the tarmac and you're going through puddles, it puts a lot more resistance on your tyres and you're going to use more fuel. It's like driving through it's like driving through water. I was going to say driving through treacle, but you know what it's like if you were trying to walk in a swimming pool, for example. Obviously it's not as bad as that, but there is added resistance on your vehicle, and that takes more fuel. So it gets very minimal. It's nothing like heating or air conditioning or anything like that, but on a wet rainy day you are going to use that little bit more fuel. And then the final thing is hills. You're going to use more fuel going up a hill, just like you do on a combustion engine vehicle. But of course, for every hill you go up, you've got to come down. And with an with an EV, you can recoup some of that energy as you come down if you're using the motor to take you down the hill and using obviously regen braking, i.e. engine braking. So you're never going to recoup back what you got going up. Roughly, very difficult to say, but roughly if you use for whatever you use going up a hill, you're going to get about 20% coming back down, but it makes a big difference. I've come down, actually going into Stroud, if you know it, I've come down the valley there driving into Stroud. What was I driving at the time? A Renault Zoe, and I added 1.6 miles of range just by coming down into Stroud. So obviously use the tools that the EV gives you, adapt your driving for an EV, and it makes a huge difference to your driving economy. And obviously driving economy is what dictates your range. So on these vans you do have a gauge up here, which is the top left one, and that needle shows you your power consumption of your heating and air conditioning system. So I do have a separate video on YouTube which explains how that works, but that needle will show you your current consumption of the heating or air conditioning system, and obviously when you whack the heating up, the needle goes up, when you turn it down, the needle goes down. So it gives you some indication of how much energy you're using at the time, so you can adjust your heating to obviously maximize your range. One of the most important things you want to keep an eye on with an EV is your power meter. So that's a bit like your rev needle in a combustion engine vehicle. And on these vans you have a charge zone, which is green, an eco zone, which is at the top, which is all blue, and the power zone, which is a bit at the end, which again is blue. On other EVs they make that red. So you basically just want to keep the needle down as much as you can, and you need to watch that when you're accelerating, because it's all too easy with an electric vehicle is take advantage of that instant torque, because electric motors, you get all the torque from naught, so they're very enjoyable to accelerate fast. And you'll find even in a vehicle like this, which isn't hugely powerful, you will out accelerate combustion engine vehicles at the lights. But obviously if you're going to do that, the needle's going to be all the way around in the power section, and you're going to use more fuel, more electricity. So just drive a little bit more gently and watch that needle, and if that needle's creeping up, just lift off the accelerator a little bit. And a lot of times you'll find your road speed doesn't change. It's actually the same in a combustion engine vehicle as well. So use the tools, use that needle and drive in the eco band, and you'll notice when you slow down it drops to the charge band, and keep it in that charge band as much as you can. Read the road ahead, lift off the accelerator and keep getting some charge back. On this related issue, it's best not to drive in B mode all the time. You would think it would be more economical to capture as much of the kinetic energy as you can, but it's actually more economical to coast. So coast as much as you can, and then if you find if, say for example, you're coming up to a junction, traffic lights, roundabout or whatever, and you need to slow down, and you feel like you need to go to the brakes because you're not slowing down enough, that's when you put it into B mode, and then capture more of that energy, slow you down, and then finally you got your brakes if you need to use them. Yeah, so it's a bit different to what people think. There's this assumption it's more economical to drive in B mode all the time. Actually, many manufacturers probably say that as well for maximum economy, but it's actually not. It's more economical to coast, but ultimately it's more economical just to drive gently and to be light with your right foot. It's exactly the same as a combustion engine vehicle, really. So there will be times where you'll probably find it's easier to keep it in B mode, and one of those times is like now, where you're driving in a town or city, because there's lots of stop-start driving, and often you need to stop fairly quickly because traffic stops in front of you. And when you're driving in a town, the gaps between the cars are much closer. So in an environment like this, I would typically keep it in B mode all the time. But you often find, because of the shorter driving distances, you know, the gaps between the vehicles, you don't have enough time to get much regen back, so you are actually using the brakes as well. So yeah, times like this, when you're in an urban environment, drive in B. When you're out on the open road, take it out of B and just use B for that additional braking as and when you need it. And that's the most efficient way of driving an electric vehicle. So the other thing I'll quickly talk about is your driving modes. So on these vans you have 3 driving modes, and that's selected via a switch down near your gear selector here, and that's Sport, Normal and Eco. As I said, I'm driving an Eco at the moment, and I find on these vans Eco isn't limiting your speed or power by much at all. And driving an Eco, I'm keeping up with all of the traffic and driving at maximum road speeds. I'm just checking, yeah, I'm not breaking the speed limit here actually, so yeah. And I'm not limited at all. In fact, driving an Eco in this is more powerful, well, it certainly feels faster and more powerful than driving a diesel version of one of these. So why wouldn't you just drive an Eco? And all it's doing is just giving you slightly less power to sort of effectively make you accelerate a bit more gently. The other thing it does is it reduces the power to your heating and air conditioning system. So again, it's all about preserving range, reducing your energy consumption. But for normal driving, I think Eco is perfectly adequate in these vans. Some other electric vehicles, it limits your power too much and it does feel like you're driving like a granny, but not so in these vehicles. One thing is slightly annoying though, is it always defaults to normal mode. Whenever you switch the vehicle off and start again, you're always in normal. So on this drive, I have actually stopped. So I did do some of the driving in normal mode because I'd forgotten that it would default. It's obviously defaulted back to normal. So normal mode is basically as it says. It gives you a bit more power to the motor, your heating and air conditioning isn't restricted, and there's no restrictions to top speed. The power mode basically gives you a bit more power on the motor. I don't think there's a need to drive in power mode for your normal driving all the time. Maybe if you want to overtake something, you can whack it into power mode so you've got absolutely full power to make that maneuver and overtake safely. So that's a scenario where you might want to use it. Or, you know, if you don't care about range, or maybe you're driving home and you want to have a bit of fun for that last bit of your journey and you don't care about how much energy you use, well, of course, yes, you can use the power mode, but you're going to wear out your tyres quicker. And to be honest, I think in a van it's pretty pointless. I think the only time you really should be using it is when you want to overtake. But yeah, as I said, I think for most of the time on these vans, Eco mode is, I think, the best mode. I don't feel like it's limiting my power whatsoever. I can still accelerate as quickly, or if not quicker, than most of the other traffic around me if I wanted to. My top speed isn't limited much. I was still doing 65 down the dual carriageway just a minute ago in Eco mode, and for roads like I'm on now, absolutely not an issue whatsoever. So I've been driving well over an hour now, so let's have a look at what driving economy I've got. So using the buttons on the end of the stalk, I can change what's on that center screen there. So first off, we have your speed. Pushing it once gives you your instant economy as you're driving, but of course it's all lines, i.e. 0, 0, 0 at the moment because we're not moving. And then we've got the first trip meter. So I've averaged 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. And if you don't know, that's how you measure economy on electric cars. Obviously, it's miles per gallon in the UK on an ICE vehicle, but on an electric vehicle, it's how many miles you do per kilowatt hour of electricity. So I've averaged 3.7 miles for every kilowatt hour of electricity. My total trip has been 39 miles. The average has been 26 miles an hour. It's felt more than that, but anyway. And you can see up there on the battery needle, the battery, we've used 25% of the battery, which if you work that out, 40, 80, that's giving us a range of 158 miles or something. So the battery needle up here isn't particularly accurate. There's no way of getting a percentage on these vans, which is a shame. That I think that's the most important figure you want when you're monitoring your battery and where you when you need to stop to charge. But anyway, on this we've just got this very small dial and we're at the first sort of tick, which is 25%. So what I'm going to do now is let's just scroll down and reset the trip number 2. Obviously trip number 1 is going to incorporate the next drive with a load in the back, but trip number 2 there is going to be our new driving economy with the weight in the back. So let's go and get loaded up. So this is what I'm going to put in the back of the van, a bag of stone, but it is used stone I've dug out the ground, and it's got an awful lot of soil in it, so it's much heavier than it looks. So this is a half-ton jumbo bag. So normally a half-ton jumbo bag, if you filled it with stone like this, would be something like 400 kilos. But I do have a 1-ton bag of the same stuff, and that excavator there wouldn't lift it. So it is much heavier than the size would suggest. So I think this is at least 500 kilos, but maybe nearer 600 kilos. So a lot more weight than people would normally have in the back of the van if you have it racked out and tools and whatever you want to carry. Obviously the van I'm going to put this in is ply lined as well, so it's all a fair test. Anyway, we'll get this loaded up. Fortunately I've got a forklift now, and I'll put this in the back of the van. It is diesel, but doesn't get used too much. So let's open the doors 180 degrees and I'll get it loaded up. And you can see the way the suspension drops. There is a lot of weight in that bag. So I have strapped it down. The straps are a bit lightweight, but that's all I've got for it at the moment. So let's get on the way and do exactly the same journey with the weight in the back. So my initial feelings are that it feels absolutely no different. I'm put it into eco mode again. I'm still accelerating at the same speed and pace. I did just go up a hill there and I did feel the weight on the hill, but I still went up the hill at the same speed. But obviously when you've got a weight in the back, and in this case the weight is right on the back axle, not nearer the cab, you do feel it, but it still is performing the same. Maybe I'll get a little bit more regen back, because the more mass the vehicle has, when you're deaccelerating and using the engine braking, i.e. slowing down on that motor, then maybe you will get a bit more regen back, particularly if you're using the B mode. But anyway, I'll do my drive, do exactly the same drive, same day. It's only 1 degree warmer, same traffic, and I'm going to do my best to drive exactly as I did previously. So I'm coming up the slip road onto the A34, picking up speed, and yes, I could certainly feel it there. And I was looking at the power meter there, and it certainly looked like I was using more electricity to climb up that hill. But let me just drop the display round to the road speed. So yeah, we're now doing 60, 61, 63, 65, so doing normal sort of speed that you'd expect on here. And even in eco mode, yeah, now doing 68 miles an hour, and it feels absolutely no difference once you're up to that speed. And it was really just the climbing the ramp onto the A34 there where I felt a little bit difference. But even in eco mode, this motor is plenty powerful enough. But if you had more weight, then yes, you could put it into normal mode and it would accelerate exactly the same, I suspect. Climbing another hill here, and yeah, you certainly feel it when you're climbing hills. But as I said, for every hill you go up, you've got to go down, and we're now going to go down the other side. So I've released off the accelerator. We're getting a charge back in the battery, even though we're not actually reducing speed. We're now slightly reducing speed, so we're going downhill now. So I'll drop it into B mode, and we're now getting pretty much maximum regen. Actually, I'm going to take it out of B because we don't need that much, and just coast down the hill here. We're maintaining 40 miles an hour. We're actually increasing 44, 45 miles an hour, but we're charging the battery. We're using that kinetic energy to put some energy back into the battery. Right, we're coming to the roundabout, so I'll put it into B mode again, slowing down that bit more. I'm actually now touching the accelerator because we flattened out a bit, and there's a car right up behind, so I don't want to slow down too much. Right. What you do get on these vans is automatic wipers and automatic lights, which is nice. I know most modern vehicles have that, but a lot of the time on the vans you don't get any equipment. It's all extras and options, if available at all, actually, on a lot of vans. Well, I didn't have this rain on the first drive. It really is coming down. Oh, that poor bloke there's got soaked getting out of his car. So it's obviously wetter this drive than the previous drive. There's been a lot of standing water, even though there isn't now on this road, because obviously it's all draining away now, and it actually seems drier here than it has been back there. So this road obviously hasn't had the rain that I've just driven through. But anyway, so that does affect the driving efficiency a little bit, increases your fuel consumption. But looking at the dash now, hang on, can't look at the dash now, we just get around this corner. So yeah, looking at the dash, we're 18 miles in and still averaging 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, so pretty good efficiency. Obviously the rain isn't affecting it too much, but I want this to be as accurate as I can, so I'm driving exactly the same, doing the same road speed on every road as much as I can. And obviously if we didn't have this rain, it would have been the same conditions. But yeah, clearly the rain isn't making a huge impact, which is about what you'd expect. You know, it's not a big issue. He obviously got wet. Right, well, I'll carry on. So just got back, been driving another hour and a quarter or so. So let's have a look at what I've done. So there's trip 1, there's trip 2. So driven another 39 miles, averaged 28 miles per hour. Actually, that was 29. I've been sat here, I've had to re-record this, and it's dropped down because I'm sat here with the motor running, so the average has dropped. So that should be 29 miles per hour, and average 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour. To be honest, I was expecting that to be a little bit lower. So just shows that the weight in the back doesn't make a massive difference, and that is a lot of weight in the back. That's more weight than most people have in their vans. And it was much wetter on this drive. So some people might say I haven't driven further enough. To be honest, that's enough to capture the driving economy at today's conditions, i.e. temperature, weather, that sort of thing. I did a complete mix of roads and driving an hour and 15, hour and 20 each time. And if I drove any further, if I drove for another hour or 2 hours more, it would just be more the same. It would be exactly the same economy. So I've driven enough to capture the realistic driving economy with obviously my driving style, but I was driving this at all the road speeds, doing the speed limit on every road and keeping up with all the traffic. So I was driving it exactly as anyone would probably do. So I'm going to take these figures now and look at what sort of range you'd expect for both battery pack sizes. So as I look at this particular van, it looks like the needle is dead on 50% battery there, maybe slightly below the mark. The top of the needle is just below the black line there. But anyway, done 78 miles and it's predicting 74 miles of range left. So we're looking at 150 to 160 mile range in the 50 kilowatt hour model. And that's obviously based on doing half my driving with it being empty and half the driving with it being with a lot of weight in the back. So I've grabbed a cup of tea. I wouldn't normally have a mug with the Queen on it. It's just I was giving it part of the Jubilee. They were giving out free mugs. So I've done the maths based on my driving economy today, and we'll look at the different size battery packs. So these vans have 2 battery packs. This is the 50 kilowatt hour version, and there's also a 75 kilowatt hour version. And the bigger the battery, the more energy it can store, the longer the range. So that's the maximum capacity. The BMS stores a little bit top and bottom, about 5% top and bottom, that you can't access to prolong the life of the pack. So typically 90% of that figure is usable by you, the driver. So that's what it seems it is on these. So based on that, So the 50 kilowatt hour model, driving it empty, today I was getting 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. So that gives me a total range of 165.5 miles. With the load in the back there, I was driving at 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour on average, so that gives me a total range of 153 miles. If this van had the larger pack, that would equate to 250 miles empty and 229.5 miles with the load on the back. So this is as accurate as I could be. So driving in the summer and driving on a mix of roads, that's the mileage I have achieved today. So I hope that helps everyone, gives you an idea of the difference in driving empty versus loaded. Oh, and that difference works out at 8.5%. So it uses 8.5% more energy with that approximately, what was it, 500 kilogram load in the back versus driving empty over that circuit I did. And that circuit is long enough to get an accurate snapshot of the driving economy in today's conditions. So I hope that gives you a good indication of the increased fuel use with weight in a van, in an electric van, shall I say. So I'm going to do this same test in other electric vans, so look on the channel for those videos in the near future. And if you found this video useful, please do click that thumbs up button on YouTube. That really does help. Also subscribe if you haven't, that helps as well. And I'll see you on the next video.